Welcome, my name is Sara Soloaga from the Basque Consultancy NIDER, partner of the SCORE project. Today we would like to present you the pilot operational plan template that we have developed in the framework of the SCORE project for the 10 CCLLs. As the specific POPs of the CCLLs are confidential, we wanted to create a template for the fictitious city that can be shared and serve as an example for its application in other living labs. So first of all, we would like to do a quick review of what is a POP to then start walking through the document. So the pilot operational plan, the POP, is a structured guide designed to direct the development and implementation of a living lab within a defined time frame. It focuses specifically in the stakeholder engagement and the panel management, and provides the living lab with a structured approach and a framework to setting up and running a living lab project. So we will be trying to resolve some questions such as when, why, with who, and how will we plan or establish the living lab, and we will include also specifically tailored activities. So this template includes an example of a POP for a model city, showing where elements can be adjusted for your own living lab context. The annex of this document also includes some of the proposed tools and templates for using during the living lab process. Of course, you can take a look to the webpage where you can find more resources and online courses about it. So let's start with the template. Here we can see the 4 phases that define the POP. So this is the structure that we will be following. The first one is the emphasize and define, the second one is ideate and co-design, the third one is prototype and pilot, and the last one is test and evaluate. Under the phases, various specific activities are defined and correspond to specific phases. For example, scoping, planning, launching, and other more. It is important to mention that these activities combine tasks related with the overall management of the living lab, as well as the management of the panel of stakeholders that are engaged in the project. So let's go through the phases. First of all, this first one is the emphasize and define, and the key focus is to do the diagnosis of the situation of the city. The principal objective of this initial phase is to analyze the context of the city and based on it, define the structure of the CCLL. So here we could have some space to put the information of the context of our city and the issues or the problems we identify during the activities done for this, so we could explain it. In the scoping activities, we are going to find some of the questions we need to answer within each of the phases and activities. So, for example, we want to identify the key challenges being faced and define the roots of the identified problems, not just the symptoms, or define the main goals of the living lab considering the inputs from all stakeholders. And down here, we will find examples of the SCORE CCLL activities run to answer these kind of questions. With all this information, we will be filling the different sections of the POP. So, for example, here we can see the main forces of the living lab of the model city and the barriers also. With all this information, what we want to do is the mapping of the stakeholders, for the living lab. So here we could have the different identified actors for each of the legs of the quadruple helix. And here we could have the answers for the vision or the shared goals. So we will be talking about what we want to do, how, and these are the main defining parts of the living lab with the contribution of the stakeholders. Finally, we would be able to fill the CCLL structure and the role for each of the persons of the core team. On the last part of this first phase, we will be talking about how we would support, protect, and reward the stakeholders during the process and the core team, of course. So once again, here we have some questions of or ideas of which specific aspects we need to work on, and here we could have the type of activities or idea of activities that we could run to have those answers. If we go to the second phase, we are talking about the definition and design of the solution to the problem selected in the first phase. So the main aim is to co-create and co-design the most appropriate solutions. Here again, we have some information. For example, we need to ideate what can be possibly be needed in order to co-create and co-design possible solutions. We have some ideas of how we can do this, like conducting a socioeconomic assessment. Then we have some other aspects that we need to work on, such as the communication strategy that we are going to be following during the project or the living lab process, and also how we are going to evaluate the performance of our activities or relations. For example, here we can see an example of the activities we could run to have solutions for this phase, and we would have a workshop to co-create and co-design these EVA solutions in the case of a score, and then run the multi-criteria analysis, for example, or the socioeconomic assessment of the ideated solutions during that workshop. Phase 3, again, we have here the definition of this phase. So in this case, prototype and pilot is related to the implementation of the ideate and co-created solutions. So the principal objective is to pilot and develop solutions to test their applicability and utility in the field. Here we have some of the key ideas again. So prototype the design solution to test them in a small scale. And this, for example, in SCORE would be the implementation of the EVA solutions defined in the phase 2 that respond to the problems arising in the phase 1. So as you can see, all goes in order of responding to the previous phases. Here, another part we can have is the part of monitoring. So, for example, in the SCORE project, this citizen science sensors or tools that we could install could serve as a way of monitoring these implementations. Finally, the fourth phase and the last one is the test and evaluate. So we want to evaluate the design and prototype solution in a bigger scale. The main objective is based on the result of phase three, test the developed solutions in a larger feedback group to ensure their utility. So in this case, we want to test the solutions and gather the useful outcomes that can be used and transferred into future activities. So we want to evaluate the performance, the sustainability, to export or to identify the main barriers and what other opportunities or best ways of working we could implement to make sure that the process is better performed in the future actions. And we want to collect all the feedback and the learning lessons of the different activities and the phases. So for example, here again, we have the different activities that can be run, and some of them were, or most of them were run within the SCORE project. So for example, we are talking about the dissemination of the developed past events, or we run the evaluation of the different phases and the project. We were doing different trainings to make sure that all the collected knowledge was transferred in an appropriate manner, and so on. So this is the structure of the POP, and here we have the annexes. So we have some of the tools and templates that we use to get these answers and complete the POP. So here you can see which part corresponds to, which activities they respond to, and we have different tools for each of the phases and activities. However, additional tools can be found in the platform of SCORE in the website with the co-creation toolkit and another several tools that have been used and developed within the project. Thank you very much for attending and hope it is useful for your living lab.